WisconsinEye is at the Slinger Public Library interviewing candidates in the Republican primary, which is December 19th in the 58th Assembly District. Spencer Zimmerman is one of those candidates. Spencer, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you're running in the 58th District, so you've had a chance to get around the district. Tell me about the district, its greatest need, and why you'd be the best person to help the district achieve that need.
Sure. Well, I have been around the district. I'm actually looking at a condo here in Slinger right after this interview, and I've been staying at the Jackson Motel and exploring the area, West Bend, obviously all the great places that they have here in Slinger, the Slinger Speedway, Little Switzerland, first opened in December 7th, 1941, just learning about the history of the area. I was over at the courthouse in the Washington County Courthouse, and this is actually close to where I'm from. I was born in Neenah, and my family was originally from the Fond du Lac area, and I have cousins in the district. This election is closer to where I was born, closer to where I'm from, than any of the previous elections I've campaigned in over the last 10 years. I remember being just 6 years old, going door to door campaigning, putting up yard signs for my uncle just north of the district in Campbellsport. He ran as a sheriff, ran as a Republican for sheriff of Fond du Lac County in 1986. The district needs a Trump conservative who will carry on the policies of Bob Gannon. I support term limits as he did, and intend to reintroduce his legislation limiting the number of years you can stay in office in the Assembly and the Senate to 12. I believe that this reform will do more to drain the swamp in Madison than any other legislation the state has passed since it was founded in 1848. We currently have a Madison liberal who is the longest serving state legislator in American political history. He was first elected back in 1956. He's over 90 years old now, and he hasn't missed a Senate vote in 50 years. He hasn't had any opponent on the ballot in a decade and a half. The last time he had a Republican opponent, Bill Clinton was still an Arkansas governor, and Russia was called the Soviet Union. This is why we need term limits. He received nearly 100,000 votes in 2016 and got 100% of the vote. How democratic is that? I mean, that's just, we need term limits, and I want to make sure that his record of being the longest serving legislator stands for all time.
So you're talking about Senate President Fred Risser, obviously.
Yeah, he's been in there.
He's a Democrat from Madison.
Yeah, he's been in there for decades, and I just think that we need new ideas, new people, and term limits will solve a lot of the problems in Madison, because people, they have name recognition, they just get reelected over and over again, and you see with him, he got 100,000 votes and 100% of the vote, and I just don't think that that's something that you should be seeing here in America. That's something that that's the kind of elections that they carry out in the Soviet Union.
So you believe somebody should serve for only 12 years in one house, or 12 years in both houses? Or 12 years in public office?
12 years in each house.
In each house?
In one elected office.
Okay.
And this would be the same legislation that Bob Gannon co-sponsored previously. I want to reintroduce that same legislation, and this time I hope that we can get the Assembly and the Senate behind it and pass term limits, because it would do a lot for the state.
The reason the state budget was late this year, obviously, was the impasse over transportation funding. How would you fund the state's highway future?
Sorry. I oppose raising the gas tax or registration fees. I would like to see Illinois help pay for Wisconsin roads. Wisconsin drivers have paid millions in tolls to build Illinois roads. Now it's time to make Illinois pay. All traffic without state plates crossing our southern border from the Mississippi to Lake Michigan should pay a $3 toll. A system similar to the I-Pass can be established for regular commuters. Vehicles with Wisconsin license plates would be exempt from the toll. I first proposed this idea here on WisconsinEye back in 2015. It's time to make Illinois help pay for Wisconsin roads. So that's one solution that I think we should explore.
Do you think that would have legal problems in that you're only you're singling out Illinois? What about other states? What about Ohio, Indiana,
Well,
Michigan?
it would be all vehicles without state plates would pay that $3 toll. So any vehicle crossing the southern border, whether it's from Iowa or any other state, Michigan, Minnesota, any out-of-state plates crossing the border will pay a toll. Vehicles with Wisconsin license plates would be exempt. There'd be a transmitter built within the license plate, and all vehicles would be exempt.
You mentioned the southern border. Would you also charge it on our border with Iowa and Minnesota and Michigan?
No, I think it should be tit for tat. I mean, if Illinois is going to be charging us tolls, the states that have tolls in place, if Minnesota wants to start imposing tolls on when we cross over into Minnesota, then maybe we should put tolls.
So if
on
Iowa,
those
Minnesota,
borders.
and Michigan adopted tolls, then
Yeah, right now just Illinois.
just Illinois. Recently, the big debate over the Foxconn incentive package, $3 billion. Would you have voted for it?
Yes, but before Foxconn, I would have made sure that the Great Lakes Basin Railroad project received the proper support from the state. Unfortunately, I believe it hasn't. This is an $8 billion privately funded investment in our railroad infrastructure. It would be the largest railroad project in 100 years, bypassing the Chicago rail yards. And this would significantly shorten the time it takes for Wisconsin manufacturers to move product to market.
Is that a federal issue or a state issue?
Well,
is it a regional issue? Go ahead, excuse me.
It is. Let me explain. It can take weeks for rail cars from southern Wisconsin to travel through the Chicago bottleneck. If you're Foxconn or any other major manufacturer, say a prospective automobile manufacturer, the benefits of this project are obvious. I sold cars in Florida for a time a few years ago. Once I had a new Ford Taurus that was special ordered and a snowstorm hit in northern Illinois. You can track the movement of the vehicle from the factory to the dealership. I believe the system was called Dealer Track. That car was stuck for a month in the Chicago freight yards. This would alleviate a lot of those problems. It would allow manufactured goods to pass around Chicago and not spend that time in the freight yards in Chicago. And another consideration is theft, because crime has gotten so out of control in Chicago that thugs have been stealing from trains. And recently there's been several cases of burglaries of guns out of the Norfolk Southern rail yards in South Chicago. There was a heist back in September 2016. 27 Smith & Wesson handguns and 6 assault rifles were stolen from a train. Before that, 100 Ruger pistols were stolen. And the year before that, 13 military-style semi-automatic rifles were stolen out of trains in the South Chicago freight yards. Chicago gang members, who shouldn't even be on the streets, many of them have lengthy criminal records, have amassed an arsenal with these weapons, and many of them are being used in crimes and murders, and some crimes here in Wisconsin. This crime is spilling across the border into Wisconsin, and we need to confront that. In August, the application for the Great Lakes Railroad project was rejected. We need to see what the state can do to make sure next time, if there is a next time, that the Surface Transportation Board approves this vital project.
Who would pay for that? How much would Wisconsin have to pay? Or
It's
is
an
it
$8 billion privately funded project.
privately funded?
So all we need to do is just give approval, and this would be the largest railroad project in 100 years. It's going to run from southern Wisconsin near Milton all the way around Chicago into Indiana. So this would allow manufacturers from southern Wisconsin. It's estimated to create 200,000 jobs in Wisconsin, this project. And like I said, the largest railroad project in 100 years. We need to think big, and this is a big idea, and this would create so many jobs and so much opportunity here in Wisconsin. And I can't believe that we just let this fall by the wayside.
You mentioned crime. A couple of your opponents in the primary are talking about the need to address the opioid and heroin addiction problem. How would you fight that?
Well, we need tough laws on that kind of drug use. You know, I've seen the crime wave firsthand. For the last 6 months, I've been working at the Chicago Executive Airport. Carjackings have been common even in northern suburbs considered safe, close to the Wisconsin border. Mm-hmm. We need to fight back here in Wisconsin by supporting the Second Amendment, concealed carry, and stand your ground laws to counter the crime wave spilling over the border from Chicago. So that's how I think we should combat it, with tougher, by supporting the Second Amendment and tougher laws on crimes that are being committed, so that these people don't wind up back on the street committing more crimes.
Should we end the gun sale loophole? If I buy a gun from you at a weekend gun show, no background checks?
You know, I think we should support everyone's right to own and bear arms so that they can defend themselves.
Okay.
And if that, I would have to look at that loophole if it alienated people who wanted to purchase a weapon for self-defense. I would not support that.
Okay. Two of the bills pending in the Capitol would ban fetal tissue research. Excuse me. Would you support those bills?
Yes, I would. And just can I talk a little bit more about some other projects? Another project that I would support. Another project we need to get behind is the Enbridge Line 66 pipeline, which is capable of carrying 800,000 barrels of oil a day. Beginning in 2011, I supported the Keystone Pipeline and created a political action committee in support of that project. We now have thousands of followers on Twitter and Facebook. Later, I created a website called the Super PAC Store, operating online campaigns in support of 12 different issues, ranging from the flat tax to building a wall to secure America's borders. And you know, I've actually been active on social media in the effort to get President Trump to send in the feds to help confront the criminal element. And you know, we need to reject the failed sanctuary city policies that are contributing to the problem of crime in Chicago. We need to make sure we don't have sanctuary cities here in Wisconsin. Okay. And we need to pressure elected officials in Illinois to reject those same kind of policies in Chicago. You know, I will work with Republican Governor of Illinois, Bruce Rauner, or whoever is governor in Illinois, to tackle the problem of crime in Chicago. And in fact, I've secured the Twitter handles for two prominent Democrats running for governor, JB and Chris Kennedy, son of Robert Kennedy. His uncle was John F. Kennedy. I will offer them IT consulting services if they'll work and try to find a solution to the crime wave right now in Chicago that's spilling over the border into Wisconsin, because unless it's confronted in Chicago, you can't, the problems are going to just migrate up here into Wisconsin, and we need to solve the crime wave.
Another issue in the Capitol is the so-called controversy over dark stores. House stores, major retailers that have been closed should be assessed. Have you reviewed those two bills in the Capitol? Would you support them?
I would support legislation if it creates a level playing field based on sound property tax appraisals, ensuring that buildings aren't being kept vacant to avoid taxation. We don't need buildings kept empty to avoid taxation. So I would definitely look at that legislation. And as long as it's based on sound property tax appraisals and isn't going to lead to blight, you know, like they have in Detroit, where buildings are just kept empty to avoid taxation, we need to make sure that we don't have ramifications, problems later on with that. And you know, just getting back to continuing to support investment in Wisconsin, we just need to bring more jobs and opportunity, like we have with Foxconn here into Wisconsin. But let me explain the kinds of deals that I'm talking about and the kinds of deals that I'm not talking about. You know, Foxconn is a Taiwanese company. Taiwan's an ally. I support that deal. We should be trading with countries that are our allies around the world. But I don't support deals like the Uranium One deal that Hillary Clinton signed off on, that gave 20% of our uranium to Russia. Those are the kind of deals that we need to avoid. In 2011, I met Igor Shuvlov. I'm sure my opponents have no idea who Igor Shuvlov is. He happens to be the first deputy prime minister of Russia. And he takes over for the prime minister when the prime minister is out of the office. At the time, the prime minister was Vladimir Putin. He's also the richest politician in Russia. At the time he was in the country negotiating deals in the United States worth $319 million. I feel that the authorities should be informed of someone like that being in this country, and I informed the proper authorities of his presence in the country.
Okay.
About a month later, the Securities and Exchange Commission announced that they were looking into a $119 million deal that was initially supposed to be at 5% interest, that had somehow been bumped up to 40% interest. And there were some questions of that deal that Mr. Schubach was involved in. So we need to look at where who we're negotiating deals with. Foxconn, good. But if it's a Chinese company, or if it's a company related to, somehow tied to Russia or the Russian government, we need to avoid those kinds of deals. So we need to be very careful. We need trade missions that will generate foreign investment in this state, but we need to be careful where we're making these deals and who we're making these deals with.
Two final questions, because we're almost out of time. There's a bill in the Assembly that would lower the drinking age if we wouldn't lose $53 million in federal highway aid. Would you support that?
No. I would not support lowering the drinking age. I was just under 21 when I joined the Air Force and served for 4 years. I was on duty during the 9/11 terrorist attacks and received the Joint Service Achievement Medal for my actions that day. I know the threats this country faces and how to deal with them. Now more than ever, we need to make sure that we're prepared for those threats. So relating to education, I would propose bringing back the duck and cover training that we had in the 1950s to counter the threat right now from North Korea. And we need to be prepared. Civil defense needs to be a high priority. We need to change curriculum to stop promoting socialism and start teaching the horrors of communism and Islamic fundamentalism in our schools. And we need to restore the conservative values that this country was founded upon. Only after these educational changes are made should we consider any change to the drinking age. And by then, autonomous cars will probably have solved the problem of drunk driving. So.
And then finally, can you quickly summarize, if you want to, any differences between you and your three opponents on December 19th?
Sure. It's often reported that I'm a self-described Trump conservative. A lot more went into that than a simple declaration. I supported Trump early on in the April primary against Ted Cruz. I coordinated with the staff at Trump's Menominee Falls headquarters and emailed his close advisor, Hope Hicks, about campaign strategy, commercial ideas. I even hand-delivered a letter to Trump explaining how I intended to continue to support his campaign. It took going door to door across southern Wisconsin, collecting 1,237 signatures to get the words Trump conservative beside my name on the ballot November 8th. I essentially ran a satellite campaign alongside the Trump campaign, distributing the president's campaign material along with mine, and put up hundreds of Trump yard signs across the 1st Congressional District. The goal at the time was to get the Republican establishment behind Trump and to give him leverage over Paul Ryan, ensuring that he would have a united Republican Party in the fall. We were successful. Trump was the first Republican to win the state since 1984, and without Wisconsin, he may not have won the presidency. We are competing for the Republican nomination. Tiffany Kaler supports Obamacare. That's not in line with the party. Steve Stanek had donated to Democrat Tom Barrett when he was campaigning against Scott Walker. That's not supportive of the party. Rick Gundrum signed off on allowing $145,000 in surplus to be spent on gift cards for employees, for county employees, for employee morale. That's not a conservative or a Republican move. That's not an action that a fiscal conservative would make. I spoke to Tommy Thompson earlier this month. We talked campaign strategy. And it was a long conversation, and he was supportive. I had a conversation with Reince Priebus. He was supportive when I mentioned that I had ran for Assembly previously, and he urged me to run again. This was at the time he was still Republican National Committee chairman. This
before he was Chief of Staff at the White House.
Chief of Staff at the White House.
Right, understand. Okay.
I haven't asked for endorsements in this campaign, and I claim none. But what I am asking is for the people of the 58th Assembly District to vote for me, a Trump conservative, December 19th.
Thank you. Spencer Zimmerman is one of 4 Republican candidates in the 58th Assembly District. The primary is December 19th. The general election is the special election. General election is January 16th. Mr. Zimmerman, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you.
Thank you.